Okay, and we can go ahead and get started and as more folks trickle in. So hi everyone, thanks so much for being here today and for joining us for the Q&A on Detours Puerto Rico, or I should call it its real name, which is Detours, a Decolonial Guide to Puerto Rico. But we'll be calling it Detours Puerto Rico for shorthand. So just in terms of what the kind of like format of today is going to be. So myself, I'm Marisol Lebron. I'm here at UC Santa Cruz, and I'm one of the co-editors for the volume. I'm also here with my fellow co-editors. I don't know if you guys want to introduce yourself now or later. You want to go ahead and introduce yourselves now?
Sure. Rafael Capó, hola, San Juan, Puerto Rico, profesor en la Universidad de Puerto Rico y nada, motivado para escuchar a ver qué van a proponer.
Hi, hola everyone. My name is Joaquin Villanueva. I'm professor of human geography in Minnesota. And so super excited to be in collaboration with Rafa Marisol in this project. So I look forward to hearing your ideas and questions. So.
Great. So just in terms of the format for today, we're going to give a little bit of background on the Detour series to kind of help contextualize where this volume fits in. We'll talk a little bit about some of the issues around format, what we're looking for, and then kind of also open it up to Q&A. We'll also talk about, we'll try to not forego, like we've guessed some questions that might come up, so we'll also try to address those in the process. And then also just in terms of language, so folks should feel free to ask questions and speak in the language that they are comfortable in, and we'll be doing the same. So I just want to start off with just a little bit of background on the Detour series and kind of where our volume fits into that. So this is part of the Detour series at Duke University Press. So it is moving forward with University Press. And so Joaquin is holding what is the first book in that series, which is Detours, and Rafa has it too. I do not have my copy. It is in my office. So currently behind a picket line, so I can't go get it. But the first volume was Detours, a Decolonial Guide to Hawaii. And we're really kind of following in the footsteps of that guide, right? And that's really shaped some of how we're thinking about approaching our volume. We've been working with Hoku and Bernadette, who were the two editors of that volume, but also are the editors for the series as a whole, as we've been kind of coming up with the CFP, talking about our vision for the collection. And it's been a really amazing and generative process. And I just want to also stress that there's a lot of excitement about the possibility of this volume. Duke is extremely excited. Bernadette and Hoku have been really, really excited and supportive of this, and just how it fits into the larger vision for this. So Detours Hawaii basically came about with this kind of idea of, putting the kind of guidebook to Hawaii and flipping it on its head, right? And saying, not how could we make people better tourists, right? But like, what if we completely kind of pushed aside this tourist imaginary and really focus on these local histories and stories of place, right? These kind of indigenous forms of knowledge and ways of understanding Hawaii that are often papered over by these kind of the kind of omnipresence, right, of the tourist economy and these tourist kind of logics and desires, right? And so, if you look through Detours Hawaii, you'll see there's a kind of wide range of approaches to kind of grappling with these questions, right? Like, how do we center indigenous modes of knowledge, kind of local placemaking techniques, right? And so you'll see there's maps, there's kind of alternative itineraries, right? For maybe touring places they are familiar, but what does it mean to tour those from a kind of local perspective or indigenous perspective? And then you'll have kind of recipes, postcards, all of these different kind of genres, right? But really emphasizing kind of how do Hawaiians understand this place, right? And also how do settlers in Hawaii grapple with their relationship to this place that is mediated through these structures of settler colonialism, right? And the ways in which settler colonialism intersects with the visitor economy. So the Detours guide, and we'll talk more about this, but again, it has a kind of range of formats. It does mimic in some ways the tourist guide, and it's very glossy. You'll notice it looks really different from a kind of traditional academic book, right? So it has really high quality glossy images in it. It has it's very image heavy as well, right? So even in terms of black and white images, photos, maps, things like that. So it really is kind of skewing towards a popular audience, right? And this is one of the things we'll talk more about, but this really is envisioned as really a crossover book that's not just for academics, but that is for activists, that is for artists, that is for people who might just pick it up, that are curious about it, right? So so it has this kind of public appeal, right? And Duke has been really good about thinking about how the book is published and the kind of format itself of the book. So like we said, that's the first one that's come out. That's the one that it has that is already out. There are a number of other sites that are underway in various kind of stages, including Palestine, Guam, Korea, the Bay Area, and Singapore, I think, are the only ones right now that are kind of in process, right? But there's others that are kind of in various stages of development, and then ours. So the next one out will probably be Palestine, followed by Guam and Korea, is kind of what we're expecting. And so ours would kind of come after that. And so we'll talk a little bit more about timeline as well, and kind of address questions about that. But I'm going to turn it over to Rafa to talk a little bit kind of about our vision as editors for this project.
Gracias, Marisol. Como bien dijo Marisol, la idea del guidebook, de una guía decolonial, y es importante aclarar que nuestro plan es publicar el libro tanto en inglés como en español, ¿verdad? Esa es la meta, ¿verdad? No estamos, es para eso, eso requiere ya, ¿verdad? Conseguir fondos aparte para eso, pero esa es nuestra intención. Pero la idea de la guía es un poco irónico, así me lo describió Bernadette, que es la editora del de Hawái, de que al principio ellas pensaban hacer como esta guía decolonial alternativa, pero se dieron cuenta que eso todavía satisfacía, o todavía satisface el deseo, la extracción de la industria del turismo y la extracción en general. Así que es abandonar un poco la mirada del guidebook y, como dijo Marisol, es turn it on itself, ¿verdad? Y habiendo dicho eso, las piezas que más nos interesan para este proyecto son las que se mueven más allá de la crítica, ¿verdad? Porque la crítica es la que nosotros tres vamos a hacer en el inicio. Nosotros vamos a establecer el panorama, ¿verdad? Economía del visitante, turismo, colonialismo, capitalismo. Vamos a establecer eso, y lo que queremos que los autores y las autoras hagan es demostrar las maneras que personas en Puerto Rico y en sus múltiples diásporas están reimaginando, están proponiendo ya alternativas decoloniales, están llevando a cabo miradas alternas. Así que no es que no vayamos a tomar o coger ninguna propuesta que sea, ¿verdad?, enfocada en la crítica, porque de seguro surgirán algunas interesantes, pero lo más que estamos buscando es esas personas que showcase proyectos existentes, ¿verdad?, que se están llevando a cabo, Y cuando planteamos una mirada más decolonial, lo que queremos decir es que estamos interesados en promover miradas que no solamente atienden el colonialismo en su fórmula política, ¿verdad? Eso obviamente es esencial, pero que también trabajen las jerarquías de raza, de clase, de género que existen en Puerto Rico y los proyectos y las miradas que están interrumpiendo esa jerarquía, ¿verdad? Y sabemos que hay un montón de personas, un montón de activistas, un montón de académicos, un montón de artistas que están haciendo ese trabajo. Y habiendo dicho eso, es importante también que los escritos no hablen por otras personas, ¿verdad? Que los escritos se escriban, perdón, valga la redundancia, que se lleven a cabo en conjunto con las personas que se están, si quieres trabajar este colectivo, pues no escribas sobre el colectivo porque ellos pueden hablar por ellos mismos. Contacta al colectivo, dile, mira, quiero proponer este escrito, vamos a colaborar, siéntate a dialogar con ella y produce algo colaborativo, ¿verdad? Eh, y eso es bien importante para nosotros porque no queremos, como dijo Marisol, que sea un libro que sean académicos hablando con académicos, ¿verdad? Porque de eso no se trata, ya hay mucho de eso, ¿verdad? Y son perspectivas válidas, importantes, pero queremos un poquito mayor diversidad y, y en el lenguaje que se utiliza para escribirles, pensemos, ¿verdad? El lenguaje más accesible, aparte de inclusive, pensemos en lenguaje pues, que se pueda leer en cursos de undergrads, ¿verdad? Y que incluso personas que no están estudiando en la universidad también puedan leer y no tener ningún problema entendiendo. ¿Verdad? Eso es bien importante también aclarar. Entonces ahora nada, le dejo a Joaquín que explique un poco ya unas cuestiones de formato del libro.
Gracias, Rafa. So sorry we keep switching back and forth English Spanish, but that's also part of the reimagining of Puerto Rico, the colonial Puerto Rico, no? Sort of that language flexibility that we also welcome in the volume. So I think part of the difficulty for some of us to sort of see how we might contribute to a volume like this is precisely the fact that this is not your traditional academic book. And so thinking about audience should be central to whatever contribution you're thinking of for the volume. Now, who is the book aimed for? Again, like Rafa said, it's not about, we're not just trying to keep the conversation within academics. We're not aiming this for policymakers. We're not aiming this for the government officials or potential tourists either, right? Esto es una guía. This is a guide for Puerto Ricans, by Puerto Ricans, or people in solidarity with Puerto Rico, that are grounded in thinking with Puerto Rico, Puerto Ricans in the diaspora and in the archipelago, right? So this is for us. And I think part of like what we're looking for is like really centering those, reimagining like what Puerto Rico is beyond sort of the visiting economy, right? And so that could take many forms, right? That's why part of what we're looking for in the contributions vary from the traditional academic essay. We're looking for like short form of prose. So we're looking for 2,000, 3,000 words, sort of stories. We're really looking like in this, we're like actually asking folks to really think about to have less than 5 references. So you can see you can see how we're not really necessarily looking for you to be grounded in some deep theoretical debate, but rather like we are sort of emphasizing that you like concentrate on the story, on telling the story. What is the story that we want to tell about that decolonial future for Puerto Rico? That could be a story that could be told on your own if you're an academic. But as Rafa said, we're actually really encouraging you to, if you are documenting the story of a particular community or organization, to reach out to those folks, right? And to certain their voices, and to perhaps sort of encourage you to engage in a collaborative effort as well. And we're happy to sort of talk about like exactly how does that look like, how does like your prose, that short prose will look like, and how to approach it. We're happy to help you with that. Another format that we're looking for is more creative, sort of written forms, like it could be like songs, poetry, lesson plans, how to do guides, recipes, games, manifestos. I mean, express yourself. We just name a few. We are missing many because, you know, it's only three of us. So just really expand your imagination beyond our own capacity as editors, to really think about the future Puerto Rico, things that we want to like. I mean, the way I see it, this is an archival material as well, right? This is an archive for us, for us in the present and the future, right? So what is that we want sort of that archive for Puerto Ricans to look like, right? That's the way I see it. So we're happy to experiment with any creative form. And lastly, we also have some visual components. And here also we can include like maps, sketches, postcards, collages, sort of infographics. Again, sort of go crazy with your imagination here. As Marisol mentioned earlier, since introducing the project, like this is a unique opportunity because the press is really sort of open to work with the images, so we'll have like high quality images here. And so this will be a good, as for those sort of artists and creative artists, to really think about how to reimagine Puerto Rico beyond sort of the classic sort of tourist imagery. I mean, for instance, I am really looking forward myself as a geographer, really thinking about folks submitting a work on like that repositions Puerto Rico not in relationship perhaps with the United States or Latin America, but within the Caribbean. Like, what are other relationships that other maps that we can sort of relate, all other relations of Puerto Rico, other sort of engagements in solidarity of post-disaster efforts and so forth, right? So this is like an opportunity that our call is to sort of really take advantage of this creative moment and document those different sort of creative interventions to reimagine the future of Puerto Rico for us and by us, right? And so that's the uniqueness of this project.
If I could add to, you know, Joaquin mentioned thinking about it as an archive, which I think is really helpful too, in terms of also thinking about time span, right? And, you know, I think there are opportunities, which is something that the Hawaii volume. So, you know, if you're kind of interested, you know, looking at the Hawaii volume, and you know, we're happy to kind of help facilitate that too. If you don't have access either through your university or whatever, we can help kind of facilitate access to that as well. But something that was really beautiful about the Hawaii volume was that there was this kind of really grounded kind of historical analysis, even in the kind of creative pieces, right? Like thinking through what are these kind of ways we can look at history and glean lessons for a decolonial future, right? What are these kind of histories that have perhaps been suppressed, right? Or these histories that are hidden over these kind of glossy, more consumable ways of thinking historically about Hawaii, right? And so, you know, I think speaking to what kind of Joaquin said, there are these beautiful kind of histories of like people's relationship to the land, right? And kind of physical places and they really focus on that kind of connection, right, in a very kind of material way. So thinking about kind of archives also in a kind of variety of ways, right? Like how do we think about kind of a physical place as an archive, right? Is also something that we're really, really interested in. And then yes, Aurora, I was just about to get to your question, which is that as much as we're interested in the archive, we're also interested in kind of thinking speculatively about the future. And this is actually something that the Palestine volume, which has just like gone through peer review and is in contract, but they actually had a lot of submission, not a lot, but like they had a fair amount of submissions that were actually about imagining what is Palestine going to be like when it's free, right? The day after liberation, who are we? Right. And so there were a number of really incredible both prose pieces that were more speculative, right? Short stories, things like that, but also these really amazing renderings, right? More visual content that was also about imagining that, right? In really interesting ways. You know, I think almost of you know, like the Puerto Rican embassy kind of thing, right? Like what does it mean to actually imagine these things, right? And call them into being. And so, you know, that's also something that we are really excited about and really open to. And I think that's where we see this kind of also like, you know, what are the ways in which we need that kind of speculative or more creative work to get us to vision, right? What that liberation might look like and how it might happen, right? And so that's something that we really want people to kind of run with, right? And so there might be some pieces also, you know, along with that, that might be more hybrid, right? Where there might be a kind of creative component, but might have a short kind of prose at the beginning, situating it, right? And giving some more context, giving some more background and rationale, right? And grounding the piece, right? And so that's definitely something that we're really interested in and would encourage folks to think about, right? And so those creative pieces, like, you know, will kind of perhaps ask for short kind of introductions to those, right, for the readers. But we're definitely like really, really interested in that, both in terms of prose, but also in terms of more visual kind of content, right? One of the other things I want to say about audience, right, is like in terms of particularly if you're doing kind of written, more prose, uh, if someone picked it up in Walgreens, right? Because you know, like Walgreens always ends up with these weird, like there's like, you know, like always somehow these books end up there, right? If someone picked this up in Walgreens, could they read this and get something from it, right? That's what we want, right? So that's what we kind of mean when we're like, we don't want this to be like a traditional kind of academic text, but that like anybody could kind of pick this thing up and like really engage with it and get something from it. And think with it, right? So we did want to also just really quickly go through some kind of almost like FAQs, like which are like some questions that we've gotten in the past. So one Rafa has kind of gestured towards, which is around translation. So Duke will be publishing it in English, right? You are all folks I know that Aftershocks made it to Walgreens to answer Aurora's question, but also I'm thinking about Jodel's book ended up in Walgreens too. So you never know, right? This is like, and I do know that in Hawaii, the Hawaii volume ended up in some funny places. But so around translation and the question language. So as we said in the CFP, you can submit in whatever language you want, right? You can submit in English, you can submit in Spanish, you can submit in a kind of hybrid of the two. We as the editors are taking on, we're not personally, but we are facilitating the labor of translating those, right? So anything that we get in Spanish will be translated into English and appear in the Duke volume in English, right? We are thinking, and there's support from Duke for this, for trying to have this also in Spanish, right? So that we can really, you know, put our like money where our mouth is around kind of accessibility and having these conversations, right? And having them in both English and Spanish, right? So we're exploring that that possibility. So that is something we're working on. But for the Duke end of things, it will be in English, right? And so again, if we're able to secure a kind of press to publish a Spanish version, if you submit it in English, we will facilitate the work of having that translated into Spanish for a potential Spanish version. So that's one question.
Let me add
Yeah,
one
go
thing.
ahead, Rafa.
The Hawaii book is very inaccessible at some portions because of their use of native Hawaiian language, and that's completely okay. I actually like the fact that when I open the book, I struggle, and that's part of the idea of this being like an ironic guidebook. It's not meant to make your trip to Puerto Rico more efficient, right? It's not meant to make your consumption of this land easier. Actually, it's intended to interrupt that a bit. So feel free to if Spanglish is your jam, then go for it. In the Hawaii one, they include a glossary at the end with some of the words. But I don't know, we haven't discussed that, but just feel free to sort of switch back and forth. I think even though as Marisol pointed out, that it is going to be published in English at first.
Yeah, and I think that's, like, I think we're not going to translate every single phrase probably, right? And there are going to be kind of, things that we're probably are going to come up like autogestión or things like that that are going to be kind of retained in Spanish, right? If even if the piece is in English and things like that. Just and this kind of speaks to one of Bettina's kind of questions is also around editorial support. So me, Joaquin, Rafa are here as editorial support for kind of if you have questions, if you have ideas that you want feedback on, you should feel free to either email any of us individually or just email the Detours, which is detoursportorico@gmail.com, which is the account on the CFP. We are a little slower, I think, at getting back to that one. We do always respond. But it may take like a day or two for us to kind of respond to it. But if you have like ideas and you're like, this is what I'm thinking about for the abstract, does this sound like something you all are interested in, or whatever, feel free to email us. We're happy to kind of like workshop ideas with you all and make suggestions. Or if you're like, I'm really struggling with thinking about how to make this like more accessible or whatever, like email. We're like we're totally happy to kind of interface with folks. And then so that'll also carry over if you submit the abstract and you're asked to submit the full piece, right? You'll get kind of editorial feedback from us before it goes to peer review. And we can talk more about what that process will look like, but we'll kind of do a round of edits, give you feedback as we decide on what we're gonna submit for that kind of peer review round and stuff like that. So we'll be in kind of regular contact with you and really thinking again in the spirit of kind of collaboration and feedback. That's really what we're aiming for also as an editorial team with the authors, right, or with the contributors. And then just in terms of timeline, so we've updated the timeline, so I'm gonna actually pull it up so I don't mess it up. But so we have the new kind of deadline for abstracts is July 1st. So contributors will send their kind of abstracts to the Detours Gmail by July 1st. We will take the rest of the summer to look through those abstracts, provide feedback, and then make decisions on which pieces we want to solicit the full versions of by September 1st, thereabouts, right? If you are invited to submit the full version of your essay or creative pieces, you'll submit those by December 15th, right? And then we'll start to kind of essentially compile a full manuscript, at which point it will go to peer review. And so that's where the timeline gets out of our control, right? And I'm sure as many of you know, there's a kind of peer review crisis. It's just peer review is taking longer. It's harder to find peer reviewers. So once it goes to peer review, it can be anywhere from 4 months to a year, right? Probably closer to a year for that to get through peer review. Duke is trying to kind of expedite the process with these because they are not traditional academic books, right? So they are trying to make it as fast as they can, but you know, it's still just hard to get people to review these things in a timely manner for a whole slew of reasons, as we all know. And so then once it comes back from peer review, there'll be kind of additional edits that we'll respond to, and then it will kind of be submitted in its final form to the press. And so that's kind of the timeline. So, you know, we're really talking about the earliest something it would come out as probably like the end of 25 or like beginning of 26 at that kind of earliest, right? And that's like if everything goes right, and on a more expedited kind of timeline. So
Yeah, can I add something to that?
yeah.
And so I mean, I think I just want to add something about the abstract, since is the most immediate sort of item due July 1st. And so the abstract might look different might vary depending on the type of submission that you are thinking of, right? So I'm sure many of us here have submitted sort of more traditional sort of academic abstracts. it it doesn't have to look that way, right? So we're asking 250 words, but just explain to us in the clearest possible way what your contribution will be, why it matters, and why it fits this project, right? It doesn't have to be super academic jargony, not at all. Like just tell us what the project. If you are thinking of something visual, then explain to us like how do you see that image fitting this project, why do you want to submit it, even if that text might not end up in the volume at the end. This abstract is for us to see the full range of projects that will be sort of included in the volume, and that will allow us to sort of see, okay, we're heavy on this part later, so we might sort of ask specific people, we want some more prose, or we need some more images. So this will give us a better sense of how the volume is shaping to be, right? But just be clear into how your contribution, what it is, and how it will contribute to the larger volume, right? So don't get caught up in the abstract, like has to be too perfect. Just be clear, this is for us, the editors.
Yeah, we're the only ones that are seeing this. So nobody at Duke sees this. The editors for the series don't see this. It really is just for the three of us, right? And there's also opportunities for us to kind of ask questions additionally, right? Or give feedback. As you know, you work on the full thing. The thing I was gonna say too, for the folks who might be interested in doing something more visual, right? It might be that you have a kind of partially written abstract, but then that you might include a select images, right? And if you're doing like a photo essay, for example, you might include like a couple of images to give us a feel, or you might have a draft of something, right? So you might, you know, for those folks who are doing more visual stuff, it is okay, right, to include some of that visual stuff if it's helpful for you being able to communicate what you're interested in doing. Like, I don't want folks to think everything has to be written if you're working, especially in a visual format, right? I imagine that might be difficult to describe verbally, right? And it might be easier to just say, like, here's a sampling of some of the images. Here's what I imagine for the full submission. Here's how it fits into the volume. And, you know, I'm planning on maybe doing a you know, a kind of contributor introduction to these photos, and it will touch on these points, right? It might just be something like that, right? So you might not even hit the 250 words because you might have some of the visual content, right? And that's fine. And that's something that if you want to ask beforehand as you're preparing the abstract, that's also fine to reach out to us and ask for us. So is there a limit for the number of images in a visual essay? No, but I mean, we will have kind of like page constraints. So I'm trying, I don't know, Rafa and Joaquin, if you could look. I think
Yeah.
some of them have like 8 or 10,
Well,
maybe.
In terms of images, yeah, but in terms of page count, I think the average is like 12 pages each
Yeah.
entry. So yeah, and most of them don't have an image on the page, but some, I'll show you this one, for instance. It's a double there. The next one is also double. And others are occupy the half of, like, at least 1/3 of the page. So yeah, I mean, yeah, there's another good one. Yeah.
Yeah,
I
so
don't
I
know
think
a limit, but definitely I don't know. I don't want to say a number, right?
Yeah, I wouldn't say a number. I mean, the just glancing through the Detours Hawaii, like the one I see that has the most has 8 images that cover the almost the entire page.
Yeah.
But I would say, and this is just to not throw a specific number, it would all a lot of it will depend on how many submissions we get and how many sort of visual essays we get as well, because like that will determine sort of the number of images that we will allow, I think.
Yeah.
Mhm.
If I
Um,
can also address one of the questions here on the question from Medina, and we haven't discussed this about finance, like helping out with financing or compensating collaborators. My initial reaction is that no, we don't have a fund, we don't have any money at this point to fund that. And I know, and I get where that question is coming from, because I've had a difficult time um in reaching out to different people. How do you convince someone who's not an academic that this is a great opportunity for them? Because publishing is very important to a lot of us who are in academia, but a lot of people don't care. Like, they simply, you tell them, oh, Duke University Press, a book, and they're like, why does that matter to me? Like, I don't have time for that. I have other things to do. And we have to respect that, right? Like, not everyone needs to put their story in a book, but a way of sort of, if you want to sort of make this more attractive to someone, I think really the quality of the images, the high resolution, is something that has helped me in showing the book. I've taken the book to organizations and showed them, and when they see the book, they're like, oh wow, this is beautiful. Like, then they start imagining and seeing the possibilities of how they can showcase the work they have done throughout the years in a very attractive and visually appealing way, and also in a book that's going to have good outreach both in Puerto Rico and the US, right? I think so. My answer is like is saying like, no, there's maybe not financing for that, but there is definitely ways to maybe, I don't want to say convince, but help people see the value in publishing in this edited volume.
Yeah, and I think like what we're kind of like thinking ahead as editors is also like, we really do want to try and get this out in Spanish, right? And just the kind of expense that comes along with that is probably where we would be putting money. But also this book is expensive to publish, right? So like because it is kind of like glossy, it's a non-traditional kind of format. We will already kind of need to raise funds as editors in order to even publish just the Duke version in terms of subvention. So yeah, so I don't think there's just not a way for us to kind of set aside money for contributors, unfortunately. Which is why we're kind of like, I think, encouraging collaboration, right? So that like if we're able to pair up kind of like an academic and an artist, or academic and an activist, right? Then there's kind of a labor on the part of the academic to help with that kind of way in which, those folks are at capacity, right? And they're getting something different from it than, an academic might, right? So that was also part of our thinking, is just like, we don't want to exclude folks based on kind of finances or capacity, right? And so what are the ways in which like collaboration might actually help to bridge some of that, although we know that that's not like necessarily just a panacea to the problem, right? And then also in terms of the other question, Bettina, that you asked, right, about like, are we sticking pretty close to the Detours, the original Detours model, which is like, we're open to whatever, right? So if you don't see something that you're interested in proposing reflected in Detours Hawaii, that's fine. Right. And this is one of the things that we actually talked a great deal with Bernadette and Hoku about, is that like Puerto Rico is not Hawaii and Hawaii is not Puerto Rico, and the kind of issues and concerns, but also the kind of like modes of like popular culture or knowledge production are also different, right? And so like, so, you know, there isn't an expectation that this is going to kind of be, you know, a facsimile, right? This is something that we want to like really speak to kind of Puerto Ricans both in Puerto Rico and in the diaspora, right? And even what's resonant with Puerto Ricans in the diaspora and what's resonant with Puerto Ricans in the archipelago might be different, right? Or what's resonant for folks in Vieques, right? Versus the Big Island will also be different, right? And that's fine. And so those kind of, you know, recognizing those differences is something that we're interested in. And this is also part of, you know, in our proposal that we did to the press, that was one of the things that we said is, you know, this is about, and Joaquin said this a number of times, right? Part of what we want is a space for, you know, a discussion about Puerto Rico that centers Puerto Rican voices and perspectives, right? But that is also about bridging these divisions that are a result of colonialism and the visitor economy, right? They are like, they prevent Puerto Ricans from actually being able to have these conversations about what a future that's a collective future might look like, right? And so that's part of what we're also hoping is to bring together these kind of differing perspectives, right? And they might be like contrasting perspectives also, right, on what freedom and liberation look like, right, for differently positioned Puerto Ricans. And so that's something I also wanted to emphasize, is that like, if you if you can dream it, submit it, right? Like whatever, you know, like we're so flexible, and we're just like really excited to see what people come up with, right? And I know that you know, for the Palestine volume, they got just these amazing submissions that blew them, that they just could not have imagined, right? And so I think we're also similarly kind of excited about that that opportunity to really just see what folks kind of come up with.
Yeah, no, and I definitely, and I want to sort of, based on that, like things like we haven't been able to imagine everything because it's only three of us, right? I'm not an artist, so my imagination is very limited. But I wanna address something that also the last question, Bettina, I think Rafa answered a little bit in the chat, but like, you know, like thinking about comparative works with Puerto Rico and artists in Martinique and on the Caribbean. Yes, exactly. Those are the new spatial sort of imaginaries, the new geographical imaginaries that I would like to see as a geographer. Like I really want to see that those connections, those relational geographies are should be central to the volume. In fact, something that I ran into Rafa this past weekend, and we're talking a little bit about that, and something that I would like to see is also geographical diversity, right? In the volume, I would like to, like, it will be excellent if we have contributions from Vieques and spanning all the way to the west coast, Cabo Rojo, and every place in between, as well as contributions on the diaspora, right? So we are looking. So if you are really thinking about a project like in I don't know if you're in Santa Cruz or you're in Minneapolis like myself, and there's like we are also looking for to expand what is that experience of Puerto Rico and those sort of decolonial futures beyond sort of San Juan or the traditional sort of tourist sites, no? So really like looking for that geographical diversity for me is really, really important as well.
Yeah. But we can open it up also for folks. You can type them in the chat, but also if you want to unmute yourself and ask questions, yeah, we're here.
I guess I have one question. If I was initially sort of thinking about a sort of like informal essay type thing, but now I'm sort of thinking about recipes that I have. Is there an option to submit, like make more than one proposal? Yeah, like one creative, one essay, or one recipe and one essay or something like that.
Yeah, I think if you're like really torn, I would save you the work and say to email us and be like, here's my two, I'm like really grappling with these two ideas. And we've had some folks email us like that already. And it's like, oh, I could do this thing or I could do this thing. I'm really torn. Email us and we can kind of like, help with figuring out which might be like a better fit or which sounds like it might be like more fleshed out, right? And so definitely like it'll save you having to like prepare multiple like abstracts. So yeah, so I would say like to just get in touch with us and we are like more than happy to kind of like talk amongst ourselves and like see what might be the better fit and then talk that through with you. Or if it sounds like, oh, you want to do X and we like that, but we want to see you address these things, then we can like also flag those for as you're writing the abstract, right? Too. So
Great, thank you. So
yeah.
Hola, my name is
Hey.
Eli Jacobs. Good to see you. Um, Most of my work is in film and video, and I was wondering if there's any opportunities like interactive, maybe. I'm not sure, QR codes or links, and then they watch something, and then maybe it's curriculum or questions, ideas around something that they saw elsewhere. Would that be possible?
Yeah, so it's a great question. We were actually just talking about this before everyone logged on. So we are open to it, right? But I think there was an issue with the Palestine um Detours volume where they had included this kind of visual arts piece that had a QR code component that led to these kind of narratives about like depopulated villages and stuff like that. And Duke actually pushed back a little on the QR code thing, I think, because they were worried about the link breaking, right? And so they had this kind of concern about like, if this is a book that is, supposed to be kind of this like time immemorial thing, I guess, then they were concerned about the link breaking. So I don't think that's a no, right? I think we would have to kind of see what the press says about that. And I think they did work with the contributor who submitted that to figure out a way to include that still and whatever, right? And it might be like hosting it on a different site or figuring out some other way to kind of include it. But thinking about kind of film, I think there's kind of lots of ways to integrate that as well in terms of thinking about stills, thinking about kind of like narrative reflection, right? One of the other things that we haven't mentioned, but that we're also really open to is also like interviews, right? And I'm thinking, Eli, about your work, right? That is like so rich, these like really rich interviews and narratives that you do with folks, and like that also being a component, right, is something that we're also open to. And so yeah, so I would say we're not sure, right, about like the QR code thing, and we can try and get clarity on that if that's like, I would say to think about it and think about like what might be like the most like interesting route for you to think about how to engage with the topic, right? And the themes of the volume, and then shoot us an email and we can check with the press and we can just say, look, we have a contributor. He's really interested in submitting this. Do you think that's feasible or should we like suggest something else? So that's what I would say. Cause like, I think, it's one of these things where, this is not a traditional academic press or book, right? But it's at an academic press and they are still also figuring out how to, I think, integrate some of this stuff to make it more accessible or to make it kind of like more non-traditional, right? Not just like fully textual, right? And so we're kind of, I think engaging in that together, right? So I would say just shoot us an email, like think about it a little bit more, shoot us an email, let us know what you're interested in, and we can check in with the press.
Muchísimas gracias, Marisol.
So I think like if folks don't have other questions, you know, we've been here an hour. It's like I think it's late for other folks who are not in California. So but like you know, we're here. You should feel free to email any of us, like I said, or email the Detours, detoursportorico@gmail.com. Email and you know, we'll kind of respond. So if anybody came late, we'll put this up and what we're gonna do is put it on YouTube and then embed the YouTube link in the CFP. And then you know, we'll circulate on social media that the video is embedded in the CFP. So if there's something you're like, oh, I remember they mentioned something about this, but I don't remember what it was, and you'll be able to access this video or share it with folks. And please do help us spread the word. We want to have the biggest diversity of kind of voices and perspectives and approaches as possible. So share the CFP, encourage others. And yeah, we're really looking forward to hopefully getting submissions from all you fine folks. But please do be in touch if we can be of assistance. Thanks,
Thank you,
everyone.
Gracias.
Yo.
All right.